is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast, and from our Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Elimek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
Today, we're joined by artist, filmmaker, and now founder of Wreck-It Games, Devon Parsons. Devon, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Glad to have you. So Devon, for anybody that needs a little bit more of an introduction, with only a bit of help right now, is working on an amazing game called Elements. So it's still in development, but you can see it on Steam. You can wish list it there. You can get in the Elements Discord and see more about it. The trailers look amazing, and you can get ready for their Kickstarter coming early next year. So I met Devon at PAX in the Apogee booth again. This was another one from the Apogee booth. And the thing that really caught my eye really, walking by the Apogee booth at all, Elements was the first thing that caught my eye of anything there. And I would put it on my list of one of the top couple best looking indie games at the show. So very eye-catching. I know
it's beautiful.
I mean, there are things I like about every game. And I'm sure there's tons of things I like about this game, but it is beautiful. The animation, the art, the world that you can just see is jumping out of what's being done. It really caught my eye. So then we started talking, and then you talked a little bit about using Unreal and you being an artist and an animator and that sort of bringing things to life. And that really got my attention. So I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then just the journey of building it, and you building it a lot or mostly yourself, and how it's coming to life and where it's going to go. And hopefully we'll be getting to play it by the end of 2023. That's all just amazing. So to kick it off, let's start there, because we're going to get into the origin. We're going to get into the background, and we'll probably talk about Unreal some, but let's start with the game. So why don't you describe for us the game? And for people that see the video, I'll show some of the trailer and some of the art as well, but describe the game to us and we'll talk a little bit about it.
So the game's called Elements. It's a stylized open world RPG or adventure action, depending on your definition. It can be played in single player or split screen co-op. And your goal is to enter the world called Elemithia as Naya or her brother Beckett, who are named after my kids, and go throughout the 8 different biomes in the world and find the elemental stone in each biome. So in doing that, you're going to stumble upon villages, creatures that live there, gain trust with them. There's a kind of a reputation system within those villages. Then they allow you to build in their villages after you obtain enough rep with them. You can craft and find weapons, all in the point to find better weapons, find better skills, find better magic to find those elemental stones so you can return home.
You could see that already in the trailers, and it's really, as I said, just beautiful. The animations are great.
Polished looking.
You can see a little bit of the actiony bit of the combat. Not it doesn't look like Elden Ring level, hopefully, but it looks engaging from that perspective. And then the things that really catch my attention, the kind of games that I love, are that kind of RPG. The RPG where you're on a mission like that. I love the RPG where then there's like the 8 biomes and the 8 stones. I'm going to go because it really sort of leads you from place to place. And then especially if there's an escalation of difficulty, then you're like the RPG elements come into play where you're getting better weapons. The 2 things that I would love to hear a little bit more about, because I hadn't in the game, but can be really, really cool, was one is, I just saw a glimpse of it in the trailers, the building you mentioned, because I love that in games. So building in the villages, and so are you like building a base for yourself? And then we'll talk about multiplayer. But
yeah, I'm calling them homesteads. I don't know. Like whenever I say base, it's like it's like somewhere where you hunker down, and it's not really. So I'm calling them homesteads, but I mean, same thing. So the kind of point to those is because there is kind of a farming element to it too. So you can build your homestead, have some creatures in there that you can get, maybe some chickens.
Yeah.
Will give you eggs that you can use for crafting potions and stuff. Also, you can store all your weapons there. So there's a storage system that will, it's like a universal storage. So if you build in one village and then build in another, and you have your weapons and gear stored in one, then you can access that in the other.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
And
that's nice.
also there'll be a fast travel system between whatever homesteads you build. So if you build a portal in the one homestead, and then you have one on the other side of the map, then you can fast travel between the two.
I love that kind of thing. That reminds me of a little bit of like Valheim and the way I tend to play Valheim, but the connected inventory, that's a great quality of life little bit there.
Yeah, no one wants to run back and get a
Right.
piece of gear that they forgot.
And then it
I
makes all of the little homesteads still useful because you don't like take all of your inventory to a new place and just like abandon the old one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me of a phrase that my fellow MMO players often use, which is respect the player's time.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
which can mean multiple different things, but yeah.
Yeah, and
I like the sound of that.
And that is one of the reasons I wanted to do some sort of fast travel. But I also, the trouble is when you introduce fast travel, you don't want to introduce it, me talking like I know about game development or something, but you don't want to do it so you let the players skip parts of your world.
Right.
So the way we're doing it here, you have to be at that village before you fast travel. You have to have already explored to get there. So I'm hoping to avoid people from missing like some of the beauty of the world by doing it that way.
Excellent. Which makes sense. And that's, I'm very accepting of that in any kind of game that has me travel to a place first before I can then, fast travel around. That makes a ton of sense. I like the little building of bases. I like farming. I like, having some chickens. I don't know. I just like that in games. And then using that then for a reason though, too. I'm less into just the baseline cosmetics, but if I've got the chickens because it's making me potions that are going to make me better, then it's really compelling.
Right.
So that sounds
exactly. Right. Yeah. It all has to make sense. And I didn't want to just stick a building mechanic in there because truthfully, one of the reasons initially was, I enjoy the building aspect, but my kids as well. Like as soon as I put the building in the game, they were just like, oh, I want to, and they just start building things. I was like, now I have to find a reason for that to exist. So it's in there, and I think we did a good job at like making it actually count for something and be intertwined in the game instead of just throwing it in there.
Now tell me about the multiplayer. You said split screen multiplayer. So is it local co-op?
Local, yes.
Okay. So,
you'll also be able to do it on remote play on Steam.
Okay.
Which is technically just split screen, but they connect. It's like playing with another controller. So there won't be any real difference for me for the actual development.
Right.
They do that on their end. So I originally wanted to do online multiplayer, but that's a whole nother bag of worms.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother skill set too.
Yeah. And so I'm not quite ready for that. So maybe 5 years down the future, another game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the flexibility of your approach, though. I can play it all by myself if I want to, as opposed to some co-op games where you have to have another person.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part too, because how do you do that? How do you make the story still make sense with one person and make sense with two? So we think we found a pretty cool way to do that. But like a game like It Takes Two, which is split screen, very cool game, but I don't think there's the ability to play it by yourself.
Right. there's a place for those games, and there are some really cool ones out there. One of our first interviews a couple months ago with Lucia DeVisser, were the We Were Here series. We Were Here Together, We Were Here Forever. And it's a puzzle game, but it's a puzzle game that requires two people because one person's looking at one side and one person's looking at the other.
And that was a very considered decision on their part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
a bunch of people advising them otherwise.
Right. Right. Well, because it does open it up quite a bit more when you can play it solo.
We have options,
to play solo. I even play MMOs solo quite a bit, and those are massively multiplayer.
Yeah.
So I do get that and appreciate that.
Yeah, we were the reason I had an idea for this game was actually playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I would be sitting next to my kids, and every time someone would die, we'd just pass the controller, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I decided in my infinite wisdom to build the game that I wanted to play there. So that's the reason that we did the split screen multiplayer.
Well, this is an excellent segue into sort of that origin story. So why don't you back it up a little bit before that, where your skill set originally came from? Because I mentioned, artist, animator, filmmaker. There's a lot more there. And more recently then you turned all of that into a game studio. So why don't you start with that? I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah. So I was running my own animation studio for the last 10 years. I say studio, it's essentially just me, but I would do a lot of business explainer videos and videos for products and stuff. And I lost a big contract, and I had some extra time, so I just opened up on Unreal. And this was around the same time that I had that playing the Zelda Breath of the Wild moment with my kids. And then I just started watching YouTube videos, and after a few days of watching them, I thought maybe I can do it. So I've been a gamer my whole life. Like I've started with Atari, and I still have all my consoles except for I can't find my Dreamcast. I'm so sad about that. But so I never really thought I'd be making a game, but I feel like it's because of all those skills that I've got from animation and video production, like just the sound and the composition, the animation, those all factor in now into building a world that people will be in. And to me, it's kind of like the ultimate in creating something for people to watch, because they're not only watching it, they're playing it and they're interacting with it as well. So that's kind of,
I think you come at it from a real sweet spot. So we live in the Matrix. We live in this world where we can go on YouTube and download into our brains a bunch of skills, which is really cool. The parts that you can't download though are the art, the artistry, basically the technique for making something beautiful out of the raw mechanical tool sets that we have. It reminds me of triathletes, and I try to do triathlons. I'm a runner, and that's kind of instinctual. Humans just do that kind of thing. But the people that were really good triathletes are the ones that had the technique pieces of the individual sports down really well. Swimming is 80 to 90% technique. Your physical fitness is actually quite low component of being a really good swimmer. Only it's not until you get to the really high end. So it's the people that have the technique and the artistry and the skill, and then these modern tool sets. And you mentioning Steam and being able to just rely on Steam to do the split screen multiplayer and Unreal, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The tools that they bring to the table allow artists to realize visions in really interesting ways these days, I think. And I think that's really good for us as gamers to be able to get those kinds of tools available to brilliant people then can realize these worlds for us.
Yeah, I won't say I'm making the game by myself, because I originally, when I first started, I said, okay, well, I'll make everything. I'll make all these trees, individual leaves, but I've quickly found out that would take me a long time.
Yeah.
And I found some amazing assets on the Unreal Marketplace, and those let you get started a lot faster. But those tools weren't around 5 years ago when I think I opened up Unity for the first time and tried it. And if they were at their infancy. So
yeah,
as time has gone by, and now it's just that much easier for people to get started.
And I think this is a note to people that are out there getting into this. That's what I was describing is the reality of what professional organizations who are making games do. You don't reinvent the wheel every single time. You use the tools that are available, and you use art assets and textures and those kind, the lightings and scene lighting and that kind of thing. You use those kinds of assets that are available. If every single game studio made every single asset from scratch every single time, it would all games and everything would cost 10 times as much, and take 10 times as long, and we'd get half the games, or 1/10 of the. Let me do my math. 1/10 of the games that we want out of this. So that is something that people should be taking advantage of, especially as a beginner. Don't be afraid to take advantage of it. Learn the foundation. But don't be afraid to take advantage of those.
And you can always replace them later with custom thing. And that's what I'm trying to do now with some fundraising and Kickstarters. We're trying to replace a lot of those assets that are for everyone with custom one. There'll always be some of them that are probably going to stay in the game because they're just cool. And I mean, 95% of people don't care. But I mean, customizing certain things like the main, the guardians, the big bosses in the world, and the mini bosses, and the NPCs that you talk to. I think those things are the things that matter, because you want, and the player characters. So Naya and Beckett, like those are custom models, and they were created with concept art. And so no one has those characters. I think that's key for someone to connect with a character that they're going to be spending their time with in the game.
There's probably some artistic aspect that I will not be able to articulate very well, and which is there are pieces of the game world that sort of define the world, define the what makes this IP itself. What makes Elementia, what is the name of the land? Elemithia. Yeah. That makes Elemithia. And then there's there's like 80-20 rules, even just in like visual art and composition, where there's elements where you want that kind of like focus and detail and like original creations. And then there's other elements, again, like the blades of grass and the leaves on the trees, that you want to blend into the background and aren't as important because you need to draw attention to the core elements. That it's perfectly fine to just go get stock assets for leaves on a random tree.
Yeah,
it's in some ways it might even be better to do that.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing is, like, even if I had decided that I wanted to make everything, like the skill set that it takes to make that top tier quality asset is something that people spend like years and years developing. So who am I to think that like I could, just figure that out quickly? So, and that's the way I'm working now, is I'm finding those people, the concept artists, the 3D modelers who have that skill that I don't have, and getting them to create the things that are going to end up in the world.
And you as an artist, I'm sure, could do any of them, but it'll take you longer because you haven't you'd like look it up and you do intermediate steps of like references, and that you would take all this time to make the leaf or the stick on the ground. Whereas, you've got the 3D modelers that sort of like specialize in, nature elements and sticks. I don't know if there's like a stick artist out there. But,
yeah, there probably is.
So, I've done a little bits and pieces of things with Blender, and I feel this intimately. I've like done a thing, like, I'm doing like a small thing. I'm doing a small model, baby's first model. And I know it's taking me 100 times longer than someone who's experienced with the tool set, for one, and for two, experienced with like art and design and composition. I could eventually get there with my little model. And I'm like, because I'm looking on YouTube and I'm learning about the videos and I'm learning about composition, but it's taking me 100 times longer than someone who knows those things, for one. And for two, I'm just doing it on this tiny little piece. I would, if I was going to embark on a project like this, I would potentially, and I'm sure you're doing this still 100 times faster than I am, but you'll spend that time on the core elements and they'll be, class A, top tier, beautiful art assets, and not have to spend it on the other elements again, because you're going to be focused on the
and I think you hit on a good point of anyone can do it. And I think anyone can do anything with enough time and enough drive. Like, I think if you want to do, it doesn't matter. Like, you can figure it out. But then it comes down to, are you spending your time wisely? So for me, like, I could do those models, but it would take me so long that it would push the game development back so far. So I'm trying to focus on even the systems. Like, I have a really awesome systems programmer. So myself and my team come up with some ideas of how the systems work, and he builds the systems and I integrate them. So, and by me having to integrate them, I still touch them and I know how they work instead of just like having him put them in. So, but for me to actually build a system, like, that's taking away from other things that I can be doing.
Yeah. Right. And
delegation is so important.
Right. And pulling in these other team members that have experience in other areas. I love that idea.
It's super hard for me though, because I'm getting better at it, but
it's a learned skill.
I'm that type of person who, like, I don't need help from anybody. I'll just do that, like, if I want it done right, I'll just do it myself. That was the way I used to think, but you can't build a game like that. You can, some people have, but the game that I want to build, I can't build it like that. It will take me 30 years. So.
And you can already see in the description of in the videos that we have so far and the description of this world that's getting created. Yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to do that solo. One of the things you talked about at PAX that really caught my attention was what the things that drew you to Unreal. And we've just recently with a couple of studios been talking about this Unity versus Unreal. And I don't want to get into a huge debate, but
let's fight.
Yeah, well, that's what people love to do. And if we titled this Unity versus Unreal, the top 5 real reasons Unity sucks, we would probably get 10 times the clicks. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
But tell me about a couple of those things that drew you to Unreal, because I think I'm about to install Unreal and get into it myself, because it
is free. You might as well try it.
I've done Unity. I've done Unity development for augmented reality, like in HoloLens. I've done put assets into Unity for AltSpace VR. I've built metaverse stuff in Unity. Anyway.
That's another podcast.
I have C# development skills, so it seemed very natural to me. But tell me what drew you to Unreal, because this is sounding really interesting to me, and me learning more about node systems and like my experience with Blender and Adobe tools is making Unreal sound more and more interesting.
Well, before I opened up Unreal, like, I didn't realize that they had a visual scripting system. It's called Blueprints. And to me, as soon as I started playing with it, kind of made sense. So it's essentially just nodes, and you connect nodes, and it's if this, then that. So it follows, like, it just kind of made sense in my brain. So it's it's very minimal. I don't really have to do any coding. So, I mean, the programmer who does some of the systems, like he does coding, but for myself, like it's just, you see it and that's how it works. And if something doesn't work, it's because you didn't connect the proper node. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but
right.
it just connected to the way my brain thinks. And I didn't know when I first opened Unity a while ago, I didn't see that. And maybe they do have a visual scripting system, but that's really what did it for me for Unreal. And that, not only that, but they have every month they give away free assets. There's already tons of free assets that are on there that you can just start playing with. So it just kind of gives you no reason to not open it up and like give it a try.
Tell me about something I saw related to this on your Steam page, Epic Mega Grant.
Yes, that is another. So I'm pretty pro Epic, just because I don't know. Not only does Unreal make sense for me, but they also set aside $100 million. I think they're a little more than halfway through that money now, and they just give it to developers. And it's almost like a no questions asked grant. So you submit your application on their website, and if they like, it probably helps to have a prototype or some kind of visual to add. But if they like your pitch, they might give you some money. So they ended up giving us an Epic Mega Grant, and I think I'm actually going to apply for another one as well. So yeah, they help. Like they've donated. I shouldn't say donated. They've given grants to Blender. They've given grants to some really big companies as well, who are integrating things with Unreal. So
it makes a lot of sense from their perspective. I would imagine there is a licensing cost, especially as you start to get bigger and bigger games that have bigger and bigger distribution. That, you know, the Unreal licensing is a component of that. So if they help make you successful, it helps makes them successful. They're creating an ecosystem, and that rising tide floats all boats. It's a very synergistic system, I would imagine.
They're very pro developer, I think. And even their Epic Game Store, which a lot of people hate, I don't know why, but for example, if I sell on the Epic Game Store, I have a less percentage to give away than I do on Steam. But the thing about Steam is Steam has so many customers. Yeah. It's like the Walmart of game sales, so you have to go there. But I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to give back more in terms of savings when you're selling from there. So to me, they're a little bit more developer friendly, but that it does make sense because they are making money from you selling your game on their store. So
right,
yeah,
right, but which is okay because that gets games funded and it gets games made. Exactly. I mean, we shouldn't be disappointed in Epic doing that and Unreal having a licensing cost, because it's also this amazing platform then that is getting all of this great stuff to be made, so us as players, we can have more fun things to do. And the thing about Epic versus Steam and all of the other game stores, I think it's less that anyone necessarily has a problem with the Epic Game Store itself as the proliferation of many game stores. I mean, nobody wants to have to open up 15 game stores and have their assets spread all over the place. And so it's no one's fault besides the fact that there is this now expanding and potentially and somewhat contracting, like Origin Game Store, I think is kind of like going away. And so it's maybe there will be fewer. It's not bad to have a little bit of competition though, as well, in any of these kinds of marketplaces.
The dream is one day that it doesn't matter where your game is sold. I don't think this will ever happen, but it'd be pretty cool. It's just somebody just buys Elements and they just have it on all the stores, right? But I don't think that's gonna happen, but it'd be cool.
Yeah. Right. I think the problem on the back end for them would be the business arrangements of
Yeah.
where the money would flow from. Maybe somebody really clever can put a meta interface on the front end. So from the player's perspective, maybe you bought it in Epic and it lives in Epic. Maybe this game is in Steam and it lives in Steam. But maybe you've got like the meta, my meta library, and I can just click on a game and it updates in the background, and I don't have to deal with Steam and Epic and all of those. I could dive into those if I need to go buy more things. Steam and Epic would hate that, but I would love it as a player.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we all want the same things for our streaming services. So I can just have my one streaming interface, and it's Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu or whatever on the back end, and I don't need to deal with that.
Yeah, now we have to ask, what is it on? Like, oh, you love that show. What's it on? And you have to make sure that you have it. And it's,
And it goes back and forth. It seems to me to be getting in that stage where it's getting worse again, because there are good shows coming out in all of these different places. There are good games that are coming out and dedicated to different platforms. Seems to be getting a little bit worse. That pendulum swings back and forth though, because maintaining those platforms is quite expensive and difficult.
Yeah, even the Sony exclusivity thing is slowly, I think, eroding, and hopefully that's maybe someday they'll release games at the same time they do. Like I'm playing God of War on PC. It was like a year afterwards. Kind of sucks that I have to wait for Ragnarok unless I get a PlayStation. But maybe someday it's going to be in tandem. I don't know.
Microsoft has been, I mean, I'm a little bit of a Microsoft fan, having worked for Microsoft for 13 years. I mean, it was longer ago that I worked for Microsoft than it was like 20 years ago that I worked for Microsoft. So it's not anytime recent. I guess not 20, 15. Microsoft, though, from a game perspective, has done a great job in trying to push cross-platform and trying to break down some of those walls of exclusivity. They still do exclusive deals of their own, but they do a great job on their platforms of being cross-platform with PC and mobile and Xbox as best they can, for one. And for two, they've tried over and over to go after Sony and say, hey, shouldn't we do, be better about this in the service of fans? So they keep pushing. Sony keeps coming a little bit further along. Steam is part of that conversation. Someday we'll get to that where it happens on all the places all at once. That would be great.
Yeah, and it's I actually had a comment about an exclusivity on my Steam page because I posted about the Epic Mega Grants, and someone said, "Oh, I guess that means that you're locked into the Epic Game Store," and it actually doesn't. But one thing I don't think people understand is that when people do those exclusivity deals, it's not an easy decision. So the reason they're doing an exclusivity deal, from what I understand, I haven't been offered any, but from what I've kind of figured out, is they're getting a big chunk of money to be exclusive. So they have to weigh that pro and con of, should I release on Steam and with the other 1,000 games that are going to release this week, and like kind of hope that we're going to do really well and hope we're going to sell 1 million copies? Or should I take this 5 million that Microsoft or Sony or whoever is offering me and like guarantee that I can pay the people who have been working on this game for years? Right. So I don't think people really realize that that's the decision. It's not that anyone wants to be exclusive.
Right.
I want the game to get to as many people as possible. So it's just, that's one way to get in a lot of people's hands, is to do a deal like that.
Right. Because again, it gets games made. All of these things, if we think about any of the monetization models and the exclusivity deals and all of it, in very few small instances, there might be bad actors who only care about the money and don't care about the players or the games. But that's so tiny compared to what's the truth of the core of the business, which is this is what helps get games made. And unless we have some of these kinds of tools available to us, and in some cases, interesting new monetization models that we need to try out. Unless we have some of those, some of these games just won't get made. And if us as gamers want to see games get made, sure, we can push back on the versions of this that we don't like, and we can chafe on things like exclusivity, but some of these games just won't get made, or some of these platforms won't exist. Sony needs to work harder to get exclusives because they're making all of their money off of the consoles. Microsoft doesn't need to push on exclusives as much because they're making money in some of the same way that Unreal and Epic is on the back end, on the platform, on the services, on the development tools, on Azure that's running the network service in the cloud, that's running the back end for the Sony games. So it's bunch of conflicts across all of that. I hope people just sort of understand that it's complex and never, especially the developer, especially the small developer, never fault them for trying to, putting their heart into what they're doing and trying to get their game out there.
Yeah, because I think those games that, like you said, there's a small majority or a small minority that might be just in it for the money, but I haven't met any of those developers yet. And everyone that I've met, they just kind of live, eat, and breathe what they're doing, and they just want to make the best game possible.
Yep. Yeah. That's all I've met as well. Again, there's probably some bad actors out there. Even when you get up to like the executive level at these global corporation levels of companies that have CEOs that we all love to hate because we think they're making terrible decisions just only for money. A lot of those people still love the industry and love the games as well. So they may be very money driven because they have, that's sort of part of the goal of where they're at. But you don't get into this industry and do this kinds of thing unless you have affinity for the games and the players who play them and yourself playing them.
Agreed.
Well, let's talk about one other sort of twist on that. So we're hoping to see Elements before long. I think that the target is 2023, but to kick off 2023, we're hoping to see a Kickstarter.
We are.
Talk about that a little bit and how that's going to play into where your development schedule is at, and maybe a little bit about, I think you pushed it off a little bit. You were planning on having the Kickstarter into end of 2022 and pushed it off just a bit. So talk about that.
Yeah. So we plan on doing it end of October, and I spoke to Apogee's marketing team, and Apogee is publishing Elements. And funny enough, I used to play Apogee games growing up, and I still have like floppy disks of like Raptor and Commander Keen. So when I got that call from Scott that he's interested in working together, I was kind of like, I actually had to like do some research and make sure that it was really him. Like I didn't really believe it at first. So when Apogee came on, so we were speaking to the marketing team, and they kind of suggested that the end of the year is really busy in terms of games releasing. And I do know that Kickstarter is kind of a separate crowd in one circumstance, but I didn't want to kind of try to be released when a lot of games were releasing. So we decided, and then Christmas as well. So, and it just is going to give us a little bit more time to get the word out there that we're doing the Kickstarter, so we can get some more followers on our pre-launch page. So I think it was just a good decision overall. So I think right now we're tentatively January 31st. There's still some big releases coming in January and February, but I mean, it's kind of the only time that makes sense.
Right. between the big releases at the end of the year, getting to the holiday season, and even just like the Black Friday sales on Steam. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff. I picked up a couple things that I've been meaning to get to. Horizon Zero Dawn. I finally picked that up. I'm gonna play that because it's on Steam. But big discounts. Yeah, a lot of like noise out there that it's easy for a smaller game to get lost. And for anybody that's listening to this, that's a fan of indie studios, smaller games, you look at Elements, you'll go on Steam and look at the trailers and, hey, this does look like something. Doing the wish lists, doing the follow on Kickstarter, that's a big deal. And I encourage everyone to go and do that with the things you are interested in. Because what happens then is as you get to certain thresholds within Steam and within Kickstarter, you get to more and more followers. It helps Steam, it helps the Steam store to know what to pay attention to as well and put extra marketing. So they like double down on the things that have high numbers of users in the wish list and things like that. So
yeah, and I think I'm not sure and what the threshold is, but I want to say I've heard the number of like 30,000 wish lists, and that is like will help you get higher in their algorithm. But I don't really know, and they could change that any day. So who knows?
Yeah, those dials.
But it does help. It really does help.
Yeah. So definitely do that. I'm following. I'm in the Discord, which is a great place to gather the community as well. I love that, and I'm looking forward to that Kickstarter. See what that looks like. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about this. What sort of where you feel like that you've got next, what your roadmap's looking like. I would imagine, would you say you're making 8 biomes?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if I realized how big it was when I started. I definitely didn't, but it can't really exist any other way in my mind. So and I think that's part of making a game is, are you making anything? Is it what you want to do? Because most things that are great take a lot of work. Yeah. And if you don't have the passion for it, you're not going to put those extra hours in. So for me, when it's the weekend and everyone's doing their own thing and and my wife's reading a book and the kids are playing games or playing outside, like what I want to do is work on the game. And it's not because I know that I need to get it done, which is one reason, but also it's just like, that's just what I want to do. So I don't think that if you don't have that, I don't think that you're gonna be able to push and finish something. So just because I have 8 biomes, it is a lot, but I mean, it's the reason, it's what I want to do. It's like, there's no other thing I want to do. But that being said, each of these biomes is, I don't know exactly the size of each of them, but the entire world is slightly smaller than Breath of the Wild. So it's a big map. Not all that will be land, like there'll be a lot of it water as well. And I want to leave some room to possibly expand some of these locations in the future.
Yeah, excellent.
But yeah, so the 8 biomes, we're working on, we have concept art that's coming in and being started on the 3rd biome. So because it's so big, it's almost like creating 8 games. So that's a lot of what's taking a lot of the time. But when we do plan a release, and hopefully that will be end of 2023. What we probably will do is an early access release, and that might be for the biomes. I don't know exactly what we'll do, but it might be a good way to get some feedback on the game and continue building. And then if we do it that way, then as an update, we will add a new biome until that all the biomes are completed. So
that's a pretty common way that the early access and the sort of the expand as you go. It seems to me to be a pretty common way for a lot of games to get produced these days, and I tend to like it. I like getting out there. I like seeing it. V Rising, we did an interview with them. They sort of did that, and you can see where the boundaries are and the edges are, and you can hear where they want to go. But it's also fun to like be part of that journey with the developer. So to be in there playing the game and play all the parts of that exist today, and then hear where it's going to go next. And,
yeah. My biggest fear would be to release a game and nobody likes it. So if you get people playing it early, you're going to instantly know what people like about it, what people don't like about it, what can be improved. So you're essentially getting development help. You're getting QA testers that are helping you, that are giving real feedback, because every time I put something out on social media, I read all those comments, because a lot of the times people say, oh, that's great, that looks really cool, or that looks really crap, whatever. But there's always a grain of truth in every comment. So that's one way that I get feedback. But putting the game out there in people's hands, that's going to be a big way.
That's interesting. I do remember at PAX, I was standing around, I was looking at your game, I was in the Apogee booth, and there was another player there who had been playtesting your game and was playing it, and you spent a lot of time with that person, and because they started getting into some feedback, and they were talking about, oh, well, see, when this animation does this thing, you see how it like went down here, and I think it should do this, and you were writing down some notes, and yeah, you seemed really engaged with every individual person who had, like that kind of feedback for you, which I thought was really amazing.
I think I had like 3 pages of notes from PAX, and that's invaluable feedback, because when you get like 100 different people playing your game, you're going to get 100 different experiences, but you're going to have some things that pop up, half of the time or a quarter of the time. So by gathering all that feedback and seeing the things that continuously come up, then you can actually maybe tweak or change the game to make it better.
Let's talk about one more aspect of the game. The idea that this is elements. There's an environmental story a little bit. I don't know from a story perspective where you're going, but one of the things that you, Seema, and I talked about a little bit in the past was if we look at the games industry in general, we've talked to a couple studios that are doing this, making games that reflect what we want, either players to think about, or themes that we would like to promote. What's your perspective on that, either within Elements and what you're doing there, or just outside in general?
Well, I think anytime that you're putting out something that a lot of people potentially could see, whether it's whether it's a movie or a game or any type of media, like I feel like you kind of have some sort of responsibility to explain, or to educate, or to at least give your perspective. So what I want to do with Elements is each biome will have like sort of lessons that you learn within that biome. So nature, the kind of theme is like perseverance and growth. So there will be lessons that you learn in that biome about just life that kind of feed from that theme. And that will be in each biome, there'll be a different theme. And that will be reflected in the Guardian, who is that final boss that you fight hopefully defeat to get that stone. It will be within their personality, which will trickle down into the world. So the villagers that you meet in the nature biome will be a lot different than the villagers that you meet in the water biome, just because their beliefs and their morals and their the things that they believe in are going to be different, and they're going to end up having different lessons that you learn in each biome. So because I expect some kids will play this game, that I feel like there's kind of a responsibility to teach them a little bit, or at least
Sure.
show them things in a good light. So without being preachy or anything, but I think, like, for example, in the water biome, the theme there will be like restoration. So you might have to go help the villagers there restore some of their old plumbing that hasn't been working, and you might have to teach them how to do it themselves, so you don't have to come back later and redo it. So just little things that will be subtle but might help.
I love it.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
It does sound great. It makes me think, and I wonder if this is potentially part of your inspiration. It sounds like a parent thing to some degree, a dad thing. And if you've got your kids as either the model or the namesake for your main characters, I mean, how much of that is in the back of your mind when you're like, the main character of the game is getting taught this thing? Do you feel like you're like teaching your kids?
And
this, or it's like
100%. And I often, when they're playing something or when they're watching something, like, I'm always looking for that. And there are some movies and some games that do that well, but some miss that opportunity. And so if you have a child's attention or an adult's attention, if you have the ability to kind of give them a lesson or show some positivity where it might not be in another game, then why not do that? And I just think it's silly not to. And
I think there's a layer there too, that this is something that is very endemic to being an artist. So a lot of people need to understand that art isn't just about, like, splashing color on a page or technique, or it's not engineering. So engineering is function, form follows function. Art is meaning and message follow form, where I've gotten into this conversation in my head, mostly on the internet, where in learning Blender, and I'm on like Blender forums, and people will post things, and they'll post a screenshot or a model in progress, and they'll say, how do I make this better? And the answer in my mind is always, well, what's the story? What's the message? What are you trying to communicate? If you're trying to create something, it needs to have a destination, a meaning, if you want it to be rich. And on the engineering side, it needs to have a function of what it's trying to accomplish if you want it to be functional. And unless you have those kinds of things in mind, wherever it's at right now, who knows? Maybe it's done. Maybe you have to scrap it and do something completely different. So figure that out, for one. And for two, the artist bringing that kind of, even just the focus of those messages, even if you're not trying to teach anyone necessarily anything directly, that adds the depth and the layer that comes through in the world that gets presented in a way that you just won't get in other places.
I agree. And I think story, gameplay, music, like, these are all things that can potentially make someone fall in love with a game on their own. So you could have a game that has amazing gameplay, but they don't have a story, but someone could still love that game. You could have gameplay that's not great, but the story's amazing, and you can have people who love that game. Or you could have just an environment that someone wants to walk through and they enjoy just being in there because of the sound design and the music. But if you could get all those together, then
something from all those things, yeah.
Then I think you got really something really special.
That's interesting. That makes sense to me. And that's not to say it to dismiss games that are just pure, pure adrenaline blast of fun. But the way you're describing it now, I can even see in that, in that pure adrenaline, looter shooter blast of fun, there's like music and art that like it gets you excited and the music pulls you along and you're in an artistic experience, whether you know it or not.
Mhm.
And you're
Right.
you're experiencing that artistic experience even in those. Yeah, that's really interesting and fun. If you're devoid of any kind of artistry, either in story or mechanics or gameplay loops, it's gonna be a boring place. And it's so maybe mechanically it might check boxes of being a game, but it's not gonna be any fun.
Yeah, it's like Pixar with their movies, they kind of got it down to a science now. Is they have the visuals, they have the story, they have the music. So that is like I want to be able to tell a story that you remember and a story that you play a part in because it's interactive. And that's the only thing that you can't do with movies is you can't change what happens in them.
Mm-hmm.
So, making a game, you can tell that story, but you can have people change that story and create in that world. So I think and for a long time, that was my goal. Like when I was an animator, it's like, I want to make Pixar quality movies. And, that's no longer my goal. It's to make games that are to that level of quality that people can kind of fall in love with and and be in that world and change it.
And I would argue that that's even a loftier goal because of that difference that you point out, is that when you're playing a game, it has so much more to offer than just watching a movie.
Right.
I agree.
It reminds me of another kind of like axiom that we've heard from a couple of people, which is games are not movies. And
Right.
in them being something different, a different medium, there are different things that you can do with them. They're still going to potentially have that journey and message and story. But because there's so much agency for the player, it's a different thing. And stepping away from even thinking about games being just a playable version of a movie, breaking that down and stepping away from that concept and thinking of games as this brand, this thing all on its own, it makes a lot of sense because I feel it's quite challenging. There's obviously, science and challenges associated with making a movie where it has to stand on its own and, beginning and end, it can't change and it's just its own thing and it has to be passively consumed. There's amazing things there. And maybe there's some easier parts to making a game because you can engage the player even in parts where you didn't like compose an edit or a cut perfectly to keep a passive viewer engaged. But that makes them very different, and treating them differently, I think is really important. And I also agree. I think there's just so much more that you can do with games that make them live on.
When they make a movie from a book, they take a risk, right? Because everyone has these mental images of their favorite book and how things happened, and there's oftentimes a gap. But when they make a movie from a game, it's even a bigger risk because you have not only those mental images, you have your experiences and the heart that was in the game. And I think that's the nature of how games are bigger than just a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the hard thing about building an open world is now I have to tell a story like I want to do, but I have to make sure that it's being told in a non-linear way.
Yeah.
So we've come up with some good ideas, I think, on how to do that. And that's things like certain milestones that you'll hit a certain story beat, or certain locations. So that'll allow the player that no matter what, if they're hitting if they're gathering the third stone, whether that's the ice stone or the fire stone, then they're going to get that same cinematic. It might be in a different place, but they're going to get that same story beat. So the progression of the story can continue to grow as you're progressing through the game.
This is amazing and compelling, and I you seem to be like doing this thing. You're out, you're out there. You've gotten some help. You put this team together. You're putting a game together. I don't know if you realize it. You're kind of a unicorn. Each of these things that you open up and you talk about now, you're talking about like story structure and story beats, and you just have like that is just
Right.
like a part of your skill set, and you've got like art and animation. That's just part of your skill set. And I just opened up Unreal, and the node system makes sense to me. So I'm now now I'm a coder.
So now I'm a game developer.
Just makes part of
But I say it every day. I'm like, who do I think I am making games? Like, I'm like. So we have a prominent story writer. We haven't announced yet, so I can't really tell you who it is. But they did some very nice, some really well writing that you'd probably recognize. And I'm in conversations with this individual, and we're kind of bouncing ideas off it, and it's just crazy to me that I'm even in those conversations. And I think it's just, I don't know how, it's from all the little things I've learned, and it's kind of all coming together, but I'm still open always to learning. And I think that
really comes through.
I'm never going to say like, no, I know. And I'm trying to instill that in my kids. It's like my daughter, she'll be like, well, I know this, I know that. No, I don't know that. And I'm a lot older than you. You can't ever say that you know everything. Even the best person at their craft, like, they're still learning. And those people that are the best are the ones who are continuing to learn. So I'm trying to just soak it up, all these different skillful people I'm working with, to make something pretty cool.
And I think that's a huge lesson for anybody in any discipline, is the best state that you can be from a philosophical perspective on that is lucid ignorance, is learning and knowing what you don't know, and then, striving to learn more about all of those things that you don't know. Because when you're non-lucid ignorance, when you don't know what you don't know, that's the worst state.
Mm-hmm.
You might think you know all there is to know. And because you don't have any visibility into the things that you don't yet know. So everyone should try to break themselves out of that and embrace understanding to what they don't know, and then strive to fill in those gaps over time.
And I say that, but then my wife probably has a different opinion of me. She probably thinks I know things I think I know more than I know, but yeah.
Wow. I think from what we've seen and so far, and everything we've heard today, we are all, I think, waiting with bated breath to see more of Elements.
I know I am.
I can't wait for the Kickstarter, for one, and for two, I'll be signing up for early access as soon as we can get it. Really excited to watch the continuing journey in 2023. Get in there as quick as I can, be part of it, provide my feedback, but just sort of explore that world. I really can't wait. So, congratulations on getting this far. I think it was great for all of us as gamers that you did make this kind of pivot a couple years ago and are into this now, and look forward to catching up with you. Maybe we'll do a recap on this when we get towards the end of 2023.
Yeah.
And see
thanks
it all
for
in action, when it comes together,
coming and talking to us today, because it's really been fascinating.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys. It's I'm humbled, really. It's that anyone really wants to talk to me. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and I'm sure our audience also sees these wonderful people that are out there doing this stuff. So get on there, wishlist it, and we will talk to you all soon.
Take care.
Thanks.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.